Daten haben natürlich eine Riesenkraft. Und ich finde es immer ganz spannend, so mal ein bisschen in der Geschichte rauszuschauen, wo waren es denn so die visionären Denker? Und ich habe Walter Wriston gefunden, den ehemaligen CEO der Citibank. Der hat nämlich unfassbarerweise 1984, also vor 40 Jahren schon gesagt, Informationen über Geld sind fast genauso viel wert wie Geld selbst. Informationen über Geld sind fast genauso viel wert wie Geld selbst. Vor 40 Jahren. Wir wollen jetzt in den nächsten 30 Minuten hier mal schauen, wie können denn Daten dazu beitragen, dass wir zum Beispiel bei der Kreditvergabe fairer sind. Können Daten das überhaupt leisten? Das möchte ich mit 3 großartigen Menschen diskutieren, die wir jetzt einfach mal mit einem Riesenapplaus hier auf die Bühne holen. Das bringt euch auch wieder so ein bisschen Energie hier zurück. Und damit sage ich herzlich willkommen, a very warm welcome, because this is going to be in English. Dr. Daniel Drummond, he's the CFO of Auxmoney. Please join me on stage, Daniel. We also have free choice for wherever you want to sit. Fabian Platzen, he's the General Manager of iwoca Deutschland. Fabian, pleasure to have you here. And last but definitely not least, David van Damme, he's Sales Director Banking of Tink. Pleasure to have you here. Well, oh, you sit together. Okay, then I join you here. Perfect. Let's start with the big question, which is ahead of these upcoming 30 minutes at all. How does data influence decision making in financial, in total, but especially when talking about lending? Who wants to start?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Please go ahead.
I mean, you just mentioned it, like data. We all heard this phrase, data is the new oil, like many years ago, decades ago. For credit decisions, data is the most important factor. It's only the question, we heard it in the panel before, how is data actually structured? And is it data that we can work with automatically, or is it still to be analyzed? Even the credit analysis of a human being 40 years ago in a bank was based on data. It was only the question, how is that data structured, and can we scale it, can we automate it, yes or no? And that's something where nowadays we're by far way more advanced. And I would say for digital lenders, for companies that are active in easy to understand structured data areas, consumer finance, for example, small ticket consumer finance company like Klarna, fully automated decisions based on data is essential, and a credit decision has to be made in a second, yes or no, and not in days or even weeks as it was many years ago. So therefore, I would say it's not only nice to have, it's the must have, and there will not be any successful company in lending in 5 years from now that's not able to provide larger ticket decisions in real time. That's the one fact. And the second, and that's what we will talk about in a bit also, the question is how much data are consumers, companies, like everyone who's applying for a financial product, for a loan, actually willing to share. And that will be the by far more important question, because that's what we're working on at the moment. The data structure, data analysis will happen for sure. Will happen with AI, with all the keywords, buzzwords that we're talking about. But the question, how much data are people actually willing to share, will be the most relevant one.
Absolutely, absolutely. But for the moment, let's stick with the opening question here. Maybe, Daniel, you want to add something here?
Yes, sure.
How is data influencing the whole industry?
Yes. I agree with what you're saying. I think how has data influenced the financial industry as a whole? I think was the question also. I think there are other areas, if we zoom out from lending, where the usage of data and larger amounts of data has started much earlier. If you think about, for example, algorithmic trading, where companies, hedge funds, and so on started in the 90s to crawl massive amounts of data and do that ever since. Investment banking, risk management as well. People started to integrate large amounts of data in a more structured format quite a while ago. I think comparably in lending in many places, and especially in Germany, there is still a very limited amount of data up until this day being used. And often that data, as you mentioned, is not even in a structured form, but it can be just a person sitting next to the person and assessing based on some also personal gut feeling to give credit or not. And then a couple of very limited data points like what we're talking about potentially later, like a Schufa file or so. So I think data in the financial industry, and if we zoom out from banking even further to, for example, the insurance industry, has found its way a long time ago, and it is being used in all kinds of places. Lending, I think we still have some way to go.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. David, something you want to add here from your point of view?
For us, data is our bread and butter, right? So we help banks categorize that data, and we also help users make choices based on data. So I think for us, it's here to stay, it's here to grow, and actually coming from the Netherlands, seeing how much in the German market data is already being used, it's very, from a lending perspective, impressive, but I think we're still at the beginning. So
absolutely.
I think that's where we are. Yeah.
So if that is the status quo, what about the future? I mean, what role do innovative data sources play in shaping future financial practices? What's coming up?
I mean, I think, again, some of the buzzwords, but I think our ability to understand data is improving every year, now at the speed of months, I would say, right? With indeed things like artificial intelligence and such. And then if you look at the amount of data sources that will be opened up in the near future, I think we'll be able to even involve those data sources even better. Saving accounts, for example. I mean, now they're not being considered at all in other countries or in PSD2. If that can start playing a role, again, that can lead to different decisions, better decisions, one would hope. So I think that's where we're heading.
Daniel, Fabian, something you want to add here about the upcoming future practices?
So what I would expect in the near to mid future is this topic of data ownership becoming more relevant. That persons, companies, everyone who's owner of his or her own data will have a better balancing between what am I giving and what am I getting for this. And this might be a Web3 topic that can be done in many other ways, most likely. But I'm expecting this to be a more relevant topic in 3, 5, 10 years from now than it is nowadays, because nowadays like barely anyone really knows about which data is processed when it comes to a credit decision, which balance is actually processed when Tink is analyzing my account data. We all click the button in the data processing agreement and that's it, but we barely read it and no one really knows what's going on. And this will be something which will become more important in the future. And then my counterpart has to give me something for data sharing. So the transparency around what do I get and what do I give will be a more relevant topic in my personal opinion.
Let's stay with that topic for one moment. What data are customers right now willing to share, and what do they gain from us? Maybe you want to add something here. Daniel, David?
Sure, I think that is a question which will be paramount in the future, given that we produce more data than we ever did, and we probably have less clear visibility where our data is being used than ever before. So I think as you mentioned, data governance will be important. There is more regulation now catching up, also on the European level with GDPR and the next iterations of that. So data governance and data ownership will be important. I think it is important for everyone to have visibility where the data is being used, but then also be able to share the data. And as the panel is on creditworthiness and lending, I think here it's a great opportunity to use data much more in the future than it is being used currently or has been in the past. But that requires that the customer or we all give positive consent to what data we want to share. And the default should be that we're not sharing data unless we actively opt in.
Yeah. Maybe one example here. We have one of the experts for open banking on the panel, but for example, we asked a certain share of our customers to share account information through open banking with us, and others have the kind of standard opportunity to upload PDF documents, which to German customers, for whatever reason, still is more comfortable, even though it's exactly the same data that is to be shared, only that it takes us 2 hours to process it via OCR and manual checks, rather than 10 seconds through the API that we have with an open banking partner. And we do constant testing of how to make it more attractive for customers to actually use open banking. And we're really struggling in Germany to get that done properly, to reach the same share that we see, for example, with our UK customers. And that's something where it's a lot about the perception of data sharing in Germany. We created over the last years a very negative perception when it comes to I'm giving data for something, where in other countries it's becoming, or it's way more common to share data in exchange for example, a positive credit decision or a credit decision at all. And I think that's where we still have to work on. Check24, Smava, they're doing it great with your added value is you get the money in 10 minutes on your account. And I think they have quite okayish ratios when it comes to, you might know better, when it comes to open banking usage. But we see that with a very conservative customer group of German SMEs, it's really hard to convince them to share data, actually. And that's the data that they kind of anyhow have to share with us.
Yeah. David, Daniel, something you
burning.
Feel the same?
No.
Is it just us Germans, like, it's my treasure? Or is it the others as well?
No, it's to the others as well. I mean, for sure in the Nordics and the UK, we see a higher propensity to share data. This is true.
Okay.
In the rest of Europe, I wouldn't say that's off the charts, but an interesting, I'm going to borrow from a report that we brought out towards the end of last year. We interviewed 1,000 German consumers, and 63% said they were willing to share data. Or no, sorry, 63% said they would like a more digital experience. So that's step one. And 51% said they want a more personalized offer, lending offer. So obviously that would, these are two motivating factors, right? How can you make it digital? Well, to automate it, and how can you make it personal by going into detail into someone's account? So I think these are two facts that we were seeing, and if I look at the real business value of it, in the German market, volumes are, from our perspective, with the same clients, so just things being equal, are increasing on a monthly rate. So I see there's more willingness to share, and you're seeing some experimentation in the German market as well, and I think you named two partners that are willing to do that, is that you give, if you have more information, perhaps you can get a better interest rate, for example. And actually, I'm surprised, and Germany is a front runner in this. I don't see this in other markets, but in Germany they do this, and it's really, really successful.
Yeah, that's something we heard before on another panel. If you see the benefit as a customer very quick, of course, you're more willing to give away your data. Daniel, something you notice as well, is there a difference in the country, and do you also notice a shift in the, like, say, last 5 years?
So we're based in Germany and the Netherlands. For context, we're a consumer lender, so we're not dealing with SMEs, but private individuals. We do see definitely an increasing trend of customers more willing to share their data. We also felt that in the wake and after COVID, where everybody shared whatever, vaccination certificates everywhere and so on, people became a bit more used to the fact that it's okay to share also personal data. I would say, and I would probably, that feels intuitively similar to what we are seeing, your survey that you shared. The default of customers is no, not to share data, unless you see a clear perceived value. So this is what we are showing to the customers. We are also asking for open banking data, and we show them that it's a much more convenient process, and also the likelihood is higher that we will come up with a more differentiated assessment, which will help you at the end of the day. So for us, at this point in time, the majority of the customers actually is sharing access to open banking data, and the trend, I think, is increasing.
Okay, so now that we have more or less data, depending on the country or in Europe, the big goal and the topic of the panel is how can we make sure that we use this data to have a fairer credit scoring? How can enriched data at the moment now be integrated to achieve that goal? Who wants to go first?
I mean, we provide enriched data. We don't do any credit scoring, right? So that the risk is not with us. So we just provide that data, and I think the more data. So let's just say if you can provide 180 days or a full year, that's of course a benefit. You can give a better picture of someone's financial situation. If you are able to include other financial data sources for someone that's, for example, currently unemployed but has a lot of savings, I think these things are all very positive things that can give a fairer picture of someone's individual financial situation. So I'm, of course, a big fan of this because this would by definition, look at a more fair assumption of someone, regardless of their income, but also looking at their spending habits. And this is something that in the European Central Bank has actually been promoting, and in Denmark already affordability assessments, so looking at both the income and spending is part of the game already. So I think locally they have taken that into account. So I think this should help give also this type of assessment a better name, right? Because people will understand, it's actually fairer. So if it's fairer, perhaps I should share my data because I'll get a fairer assessment of my current situation.
Fabian, do you agree here? How can we use data now for more financial inclusion?
Yeah, I think the affordability assessment in real estate mortgages is a very good example, because there was this whole discussion around like people at the age of 60 plus not being able to pick up a loan any longer, even though they might sit on like substantial cash in their saving accounts or in their portfolio whatsoever. So there, more data is obviously very easy to understand, creating a more inclusive credit decision making. I think it also goes for many, many other customer groups. You mentioned the unemployment example, for example. There is in the customer group that we are servicing, meaning small companies, for example, the financial accounts from 2 years ago are barely having any influence on the solvency of a company as of today. So for us, it's way more important to understand very current data, and current data there, for example, can be, if it's a company in the hospitality industry, Google reviews might be way more relevant for the solvency plus the likelihood that this company will still be operating in 6 months from now than the financial accounts from 2 years ago. And that's where the important thing is that we need to explain why we use which data to customers, so that customers are willing to proactively support us in gathering that data. Because the problem that we are facing, or that I think many companies in areas where you're not doing tens of thousands credit decisions each day, but only a couple of hundreds or a couple of thousands, it's quite easy to be biased in what is adding discrimination to your risk model, while it's quite hard to really say this specific additional data point is really improving my risk model. And that's where we're having many data scientists working on nothing else than understanding with data points are increasing our Gini, increasing our discrimination, and then explaining that to the customers. And that's quite important, I think, for us, and also for customers to, again, understand why data usage is adding value and being a fair thing in credit decision making.
Absolutely, and transparency is key here, absolutely. Daniel, something you want to add here?
Yeah, I mean, to maybe state the obvious, the title is, the panel is titled A New Hope for Fair Creditworthiness, which implies that today is not fair. And we definitely see that in the German market when it comes to consumers getting credit. So traditional financial institutions, banks, without any blaming, but just describing the status quo, would focus on, say, 3 main areas. One is the credit file, so what here is called the Schufa bureau file. Second is a couple of very limited plain factors, like are you employed, how long have you been with your employer, how long have you been living at the same place, and so on. And the third one, and probably worst of all, is that the person has some personal feeling and biases towards you if they actually see you in the bank branch. So on the Schufa file, for many people, especially those who have recently come to Germany or so on, there's not much information in the Schufa file, and banks traditionally focus on the very top part of the Schufa stack, so to speak, so only the very good risks. And on the second part, on those criteria, banks would typically require you to have stayed in your job for at least 6 months or even longer, to have lived in the same place for maybe ideally a couple of years, and so on. So what we see in today's world is people move jobs faster, they move their residential place much faster, so it's much harder and the discrimination against most people will only increase over time, not even speaking about personal biases. So what we see is using data, as we, for example, do also with a lot of data science, we can give a much more objective chance to people by not looking at some maybe disadvantages in the past, but at what you also said, real-time data. So we can look at what is the current level of income, what is the current spending pattern, what is the rent level, and so on. And we can come up with a much better, much granular, and also much more predictive assessment of someone's creditworthiness, and potentially give them a chance where they might be rejected by some traditional institution for some maybe not so clever outward reasons.
Nevertheless, I would like to. We're interpreting fair now from a purely borrower perspective. A fair credit decision only means it's as precise as it should be, predicting is someone able to repay within the agreed terms. Fair doesn't mean everyone is getting a credit. It means
that's an important point.
We're assessing your creditworthiness best on our current information base, and that's why. So to me, it's not only about making credit accessible to everyone, it's about making credit accessible in the right form to those people that can actually afford it. And fair can also be saying no to someone who can't afford it. And I think that's something when we only think from this consumer protection perspective, we are easily tending to say it should be everyone is getting a loan. No, that's not the fair point. The fair point is those that can afford that kind of loan within those terms should get a yes.
Absolutely. We're saying no to somebody, you're saving the other ones you say yes to.
It's also
Absolutely right. And we saw the decision on the ECG on the Schufa score just a couple of days ago. But still, me as a customer, maybe I come to the point where I say, I just want to make sure that these data I have shared with you are not going to be used against me. So just imagine for a second you have to negotiate with a consumer protection agency. So what kind of safeguards, what kind of regulations do we need to protect customers from unfair credit scoring or decisions based on the data that you have?
Yeah.
What do we need?
Maybe I start. So I think two key general principles are key. One is, as I mentioned earlier, consent. So the customer has to be in charge what they want to share and what not. And secondly, transparency. So they would need to see what data we have collected, and they would also, maybe relate back to the first point, be able to withdraw their consent at any point in time and have their data deleted upon their request. And then maybe a bit less obvious point, because you mentioned discrimination. What is the question? If I have to negotiate with the Consumer Protection Agency, I think, and that's maybe not a given in today's world of AI, if we are talking about lending, I as a lender should be able to explain what data has been used in coming up with a credit decision. And that's where, for example, black box AI models reach their limits, because which we are not using, for example. But if you just use some black box model, what I'm calling, right, where you just throw in a lot of data and you'll get a result, and you don't exactly know what contributed to the result, that might have high predictive power, but you don't know what factors are being used. For example, something that we actively exclude from our credit decisioning is gender. Even though we see a slight tendency that it has some predictive power, we wouldn't use it. And that's what you cannot do in a black box model. So that would be maybe my third point for the Customer Protection Agency, that you have to also be able to explain how data is then being used to come up with the decision. Yeah.
Fabian, coming up as a second, it's a bit difficult because, of course, you agree to everything Daniel has said, but something you want to add maybe?
Yeah, I would maybe add in that discussion that let's say the factual state at the moment is that those companies that have a tendency to be open to use more data for credit decisions are also open to provide more loans to a broader customer group. So we, again, like thinking 10 years back, everyone was talking about banks sitting on this like insanely big data treasure and being perfectly suited to be the next and upcoming data stars and knowing everything about us, because like my bank that I was banking with for 20 years knows everything about my income development, where I was living, because my rent is always including my address and stuff like this. So they should have the perfect knowledge about, is it fine giving a loan to Fabian, yes or no? But they're failing on that. While other companies that are more into understanding data structure, into analyzing data into relevant outcomes, like ours here on the panel, are open to just open up loans to customer groups that might not be perfectly suited for traditional financial players. So therefore, the first thing would be the proof of concept at the moment says, let's make data more usable for everyone, not for everyone. Consent is the super important keyword here, but nevertheless, let's make it more usable for credit decisions because it is inclusive. Second thing is then the whole consent part and the transparency part being the last one. Obviously, this has to be limited where it's becoming an IP of the company, sharing too much information about the credit model.
I think we all agree on here. The smart usage of data is, of course, more inclusive than exclusive. David, something you wanna add here? Is everything mentioned already?
No, I mean, Consumer Protection Agency is there to protect its consumers. So I mean, and in that sense, the point that you made actually on the previous question still stands. How can we make sure that people can afford the loans they're taking? And if you need data to do that, then you're protecting consumers. And they provide consent for this. So I think it's logical that structured data will remain a process or a part of this process. And
Maybe because it's a fun story and just was yesterday in the German Spiegel. We overloaded customers and consumers especially with so much information that barely one is reading anything. There was a UK person, a lawyer, that was selling some service on his website, and he was including a small sentence in his data protection agreement saying that whoever reads this sentence and sends me a letter will get a free bottle of wine. And it took 160,000 visitors to his website before the first one was actually reaching out to him. So
really?
Why? Because it was in point 7 out of 8 and no one is reading it. So we're talking so much about protection, but we're making it so complicated for consumers and also for companies to actually follow up on what are we talking about, that it's pretty much only like the media perception that is in all our heads and not really the proper understanding of what can we do and what is allowed.
Sometimes I have the feeling that this is the actual plan, like to put all of these stuff there, that you have to scroll down for 15 minutes and then you just push the button, of course. Our smart audience already noticed, of course, that in the last 5 minutes we always talk about artificial intelligence and the potential AI has in our topic. So how do you see the potential not only of AI, also of machine learning to have an even fairer credit scoring? David, please start.
Yeah, super quick. I mean, we started our business with categorizing for consumers, right? And we did not have hundreds of Swedish data scientists going through it line by line. We started with machine learning already 10 years ago, and I think we've only gone further in that, and now the last year, indeed, AI is coming up. We're not using it on everything yet, but definitely on some of the decisions. And it will allow us to expand to other countries, to other regions, because that's what AI is very good at. It's good at translations. It's good at giving some type of probability of what something can be. And I think we'll continue to use it that way. And the more accurate we can categorize, and the more accurate we can kind of put things into the right boxes, hopefully that will lead to a fairer decision. So from our perspective, this is how we're embracing it. Speaking specifically about Tink. So yeah, and
Daniel, Auxmoney.
Yeah, of course.
Potential of AI.
As we talked about, I think our companies are in a way built on the promise of data science and using data and algorithms and machine learning to come up with predictive models. I already mentioned the limitations of like neural nets or something where you just throw in data and you get some results and you don't know what happens. And I think we won't see that for us in the near future. But there's also, beyond the pure credit decision, there's of course many places where you can use now Gen AI or large language models. So for example, in customer service, we get hundreds and hundreds of emails from customers every day. And we've started to, for example, pre-classify and help our customer agents to deal with that workload a lot more efficient than in the past. So in those types of areas, we're definitely going to see adoption and faster adoption soon.
Fabian, the potential of AI, machine learning, large language models, all that comes along with it.
Hard to fill 5 minutes because I would only agree to the two. For us, it's also pretty much about data preparation at the moment, data preparation being mostly driven by machine learning rather than AI. We also, as of now, don't believe in AI in credit decision making. That's also due to the fact we, as an SME lender, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of credit decisions a day. So this big data approach that Google, Microsoft, whomsoever is talking about, not true for us. We're talking about still very small cohorts, especially when you cut it down into like statistically comparable pieces, and then AI is just not the proper way to do it. Machine learning is way better. So machine learning in data preparation, machine learning in supporting credit decision making, which at our company still often includes a very manual component. And AI, especially like Gen AI, large language models, is something that we rather see in top of funnel attraction. So we use it in marketing quite intensely. We use it in customer service nowadays. And that's where we also, at least for the next years, are seeing the bigger advantages, which again can be something which is from a fairness of credit perspective. If the customer in customer service is getting the best answer to his question, it's also again something which is fair about credit decision making. So I wouldn't say that it's completely out of the topic. It's only we don't believe as of now in AI, especially this idea of Gen AI in credit decision making, black hole models where you barely know what is actually phrasing the final outcome. That's not what we see for our business for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Okay,
maybe
perfect.
Just to add to that, so because we are not a lender ourselves, but we supply to other lenders, AI would actually make, if we started using it even more, it would complicate things because not every lender and bank looks at the same things, right? So it sits way better at the credit on the credit decision making than on the let's just say categorization and input of data side.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we still have 2 minutes for questions from the audience. Somebody who has a question in here. If yes, you're just walking for coffee or walking for microphone to ask a question? It was just the coffee. Okay, perfect. Then it gives me a final minute for the last question. If you have to sum it up, the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity of data-driven lending practices, what would it be? Fabian, let's start with you.
I think it's exactly the same. Transparent or consent based on transparency from the customer. That's the biggest challenge because we have a very negative perception in Germany towards what are others doing with my data. And at the same time, it's by far the biggest opportunity because if we explain what the advantage can be to the customer, there's such a tremendous upside in forming proper, fair decisions. And that's why I would say this, like getting this negativity out of data usage in the German perception, while at the same time then also transporting fair, transparent knowledge and information with regards to what will be done with the data and how can you also like get your consent back and whatsoever. That will be our biggest opportunity and challenge for the next years.
Daniel, opportunity and challenge, and you have to say something different than Fabian.
I think it's not that easy. The biggest opportunity, I think, is, eventually credit is only a means to an end, right? You haven't achieved anything by giving people money. So I think the end in itself, or the eventual end, is what people can do with that money. So the opportunities is for maybe small businesses to start or invest, for people to realize their dreams, to buy something, to refinance high paying debt or so on, so to move forward and build something in their lives. And this is, I think, what data can do and help achieve beyond that. And the challenges, I think, is to find the right balance in the responsible usage of data across all parts of that value chain.
Absolutely. David,
something
final turn, I'm sorry. No, it's getting harder.
No, I think the opportunity is, of course, within the context of everything that we've been discussing today, is that there will be more data, right? So I think that will include the savings, investments of people, open data as a whole, the movement. I mean, that is a huge opportunity to be able to offer a fairer creditworthiness. And I think the challenge is getting that infrastructure in place, right? That's where we have been. I think I was speaking to a colleague today. I mean, 10 years ago, he looked, okay, 10 years from now, open banking is going to be everywhere. Right? Even then, we're still, let's just say, not fully there yet. And I think with the new things, new data sources opening up, that'll be the challenge. How can we get that now, banks and pension funds, et cetera, to invest in this infrastructure to make it indeed a more fair situation?
Thanks to all three of you for this perfect sum up. It was a pleasure to talk to you in this 30 minutes, and I think we just brought it to the point very, very good. So thank you very much, David, Daniel, Fabian, for joining me here on stage.
Thank you.
This is your round of applause. Thanks.